here we are working on this 3.6 liter that I've had for just way too long. I have this torque sequence, and for whatever reason it's missing number 2, and we move along, we get all the way up to 22, and then we skip to 28. So there's a funky, I don't know what's going on here, but we're tightening everything down to 14 foot-pounds. And now we're going to go back through again. And yeah, for whatever reason, I mean, there's a little bit of jumping around, but it's pretty much a circle. So we're going to go 60 degrees from everything, wherever it is right now, and then paint mark it and call it good. Now, 60 degrees, if we're flat here, and we're here, that's 90. So I need to go two-thirds of 90 degrees. So that's what I'm going to work on. And of course, they don't always start at vertical, so I'm going to have to go to here. We've also got a couple smaller bolts here that have a 10mm head versus the 13. And I ran in the same torque spec here, but I'm just going to do a 45. And now I can just verify that all my bolt heads have ink on them, and I'm in good shape. Good deal. Now here's a funny one. I've mentioned before that I like to make my YouTube videos for myself, that I can go back once in a while and just see what I did. And this is all screen recordings of my previous YouTubes, and I mirrored it or reversed it. So I just thought it was pretty funny. Listen to this. So now I can go back and I can see what I took apart first or last. I don't know what I was saying, but I think that's funny. Anyway, I have this, and this is basically going to be my manual. And so I will start from the beginning, which was as far down, torn down as this was. And I'll be able to put, okay, I've got to put my power steering on long before I even get my valve covers on. My tensioner is in place. That's part of the torque sequence for that front cover. Then I can do my valve covers. I did some cleaning here. Then I can do my intake and work on the harness. So I'm going to get the power steering put back in place. Remember, I have some new power steering lines, and these ones had some signs of weeping, and so I'm going to get to work there. I can also go ahead and put my harmonic balancer on whenever I have time, because I don't even think that was part of my video series, how I pulled it off with a big puller. But anyway, that is ready to go on as well. I've already pre-greased that seal. I'll probably put some grease on this crank snout as well before I press it on. But we have here our power steering. I have 1 bolt here, 1 bolt there. Perfect. One of the best parts about keeping the bolts in place, that I can just pop it right back in. that reservoir I'm not going to do right away because I still need to do, I think, this thermostat housing. I need to do valve covers, so that's still in the way. We'll just leave it up top here for a minute. This one, I believe, is a transmission line. Yep, it says that, so I can stick that out of the way still. This one here is my power steering hose. It's pretty cool. It's got new little bushings and everything for my clamps. That's generous of them. Now I am ready to clean this valve cover mating surface, but I have this dried piece of silicone here, so I'm going to trim those areas, and then when it comes time to assembly, I'm going to put a dab of silicone in all those corners, just like the factory did. So now we have used a razor blade and scraped this entire surface. And the intake surface on this side, you can kind of see how much filth is still over there on the back bank compared to the front bank. I've got my RTV dabs on the mating surfaces of the cylinder head to that front cover. And now I'm ready for this valve cover. This is not very necessary, but for the sake of it, I'm going to just throw a little bit of grease on these seals. I have my new spark plugs in this front bank, so I'm going to drop the coils down in and get them tightened up as well. Now it's time to move to the back bank. Hindsight, I probably should have finished this valve cover up before I replaced this power steering hose. And I do believe I'll be able to work around it. Forgot something. These spark plugs come pre-gapped from the factory, so I can just drop them in, tighten them down. Now, as long as these gaskets are not compromised, they have a basically a shoulder bolt that compresses these to a certain thickness, and I have never had an issue with reusing a factory gasket. I'm going to smear a very thin bead of silicone. It probably won't even be a bead. I'll just take it on my finger and wipe it just to make sure that if there's any imperfections or impurities in the mating surface, I'll be able to seal it up. Otherwise, the material that they use from the factory is pretty good. We don't have any coolant that we're sealing like an old school 350 would. We don't have any oil moving through this. It's just simply air. So we're just making an air brake so that way the throttle body and the fuel system can run the way they're designed. Since I have this Right Stuff Permatex, and it's so easy to get out of the little tube, I am going to just coat this. I'm going to pop this on to the bottom of the intake and do the same thing to this side. Now, very many times I will preach that I do not like power tools on engines. Well, this harmonic balancer was one instance where I kind of decided that I needed an impact. And so what I did was I went to the hardware store and I got, I know it doesn't look like it, but I got $20 worth of metric grade, oh, there goes 10 bucks, 8.8 bolts, and I got a nut. And then I also raided my bolt bin and just grabbed a couple 5/8 washers and a big 3/4 inch nut, more or less to create a bearing. And so these are 14 millimeter by 1.5 thread, and I got one, this was about the length of that bolt, and then one that was a little bit longer. And so with this nut and these washers, I stacked up and ran the balancer in as far as I felt comfortable with. I didn't want to bottom out the threads here. Ran it in, changed gears, went to washers only, ran that in until I felt like I had enough grip that I could go to nut and washers, and that's that. If I could have found a bolt about this long that was threaded all the way, I would have threaded this in as far as I could and used the nut to push it on, but it's just not the way it worked. So my impact was the quickest way to have low impact to the bearings and to the engine by making it a fast, swift jolt and not having to beat on that whole system. Now my valve covers are on, my intake is on, my thermostat housing is on, my water pump is on, power steering pump, harmonic balancer. So now I can put this motor mount on that was in the way of some of this stuff, and then start working on the harness. Now, watching through here, I can see that I did intake, valve covers, harness, all that stuff before power steering reservoir and motor mount. So it looks like I need to work on getting the alternator, the wiring harness, then power steering reservoir, then motor mount. And boom, we'll be ready to put this in the car, I hope. So through watching some of my old videos on this project, taking it apart, I have routed my belt. I have routed my wire harness. There are a few spots where some of the clips had broken off on the wire harness. So when it comes time to assembly, I might have to zip tie this or that in place, but we've got our whole rear harness in place. We've got our harness down below. I do have this bolt with a 10mm head and this bolt with, I think, a 15mm head. Those are loose and I don't know what went there. I'm guessing some type of a heat shield. Which, now that I say that, boom, look what I just found. So I'm gonna pop that heat shield on. That's so funny how those things come together. And then I do believe this is ready to go back into the car. Remember, my air conditioning is still in the car. I never had to take the charge out of it. That's going to be for that. My belt will go here once I get that all in place. I do have a plug here as well that I still am looking for. My guess is that once it's in the car, I will find the rest of the pigtail here. There's going to be some main connectors here. Same thing over here. I've got some main connectors that need to just go back in the way they are for now. And then we're going to be good to go. If you recall, I'm going to need to drain the oil still. I left it full because I wanted any debris and impurities to be captured by the oil. So when I drain it out, that all goes with it. We'll change the oil. We'll get some coolant in here. We'll get some power steering fluid. We'll drive this thing down the road. I think I'm pretty excited for this. I do believe that today is the day that this subframe gets married back with this vehicle. The 3.6 liter Chevy Traverse platform is not my favorite ever again. I don't think I'm going to want to tackle this job. It's just not that much fun. So I've got to clear a couple things out of the way. This car has been in here for like 10 months. So it's time to go. It is time to go. I'm excited. I'm excited to get this back together. I think that it's going to take a little bit of maybe some ratchet strappery to get my everything in place and get this dropped back down. So without further ado, I've got a little mess to clean up, get some things out of the way. I can roll this back into place and we can have a functioning car once again. So here we are. I have the engine pretty much in line with where it needs to be. I'm going to just kind of keep monitoring my shocks because once I get down low enough, I'm going to have to push them in to clear the wheel wells. I want to make sure that while I'm coming down, that AC pump has room to slide back in here. I don't really have a whole lot more to do other than just make this work. I'm going to just come down slow, check things, come down slow, check things. Looks like I could probably come down a whole foot before I need to worry about anything interfering. So we'll come down 6 inches and check it again. So pushing this back a little bit just gave me a little bit more room for that air compressor. So as I come down, I just have to kind of figure back and forth. I'm going to work on getting the suspension back up in place. Well, that is a dandy sight right there. We have a strut installed. Subframe bolted engine cradle. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a long time coming. Long time coming. Pow! There we are. It is back together. And I can lift up and lower this vehicle once again. I still have a long ways to go. I need to finish installing the AC compressor. I've got to wire that up. I have all the hardware for it on this messy bench. It's time to eat or time to come play or something, the rooster's saying. I have a lot of wiring, fuel lines, coolant, power steering, transmission, all those cooling lines to hook up. A little bit more wiring to go. I'm gonna go have a snack with the chickens. Just kidding. But I think that's gonna wrap up this episode of Project Out of Time 3.6 liter Chevy Traverse timing chains. So excited to hear this thing come back to life. I'm so excited to get this thing rolling again under its own power. Thanks for watching and have a great day.